to the premier broadcast of WVP Radio. And I'm Michael Edward, gladly to be your host. I can't wait to get going with this show. We have an hour and 30 minutes, well, actually an hour and 25 minutes remaining. And this is something I've waited for a lot of years, to be able to have a broadcast like this. And there have been some really great people help me out to get this started. So I thank them, especially my producer Liz, and lots of others and family behind it. Tonight is not just a premiere broadcast, it's to bring people up to date on what's really going on in the Gulf of Mexico, which is quite different than what all the mainstream media and TV and newspapers around the world have shown. I'm going to bring you tonight some first-hand testimonies from people who live on the Gulf as I do. I'm somebody who lives in Florida along the Gulf Coast, south of Sarasota, and admittedly, although we don't have the same problems on the north, the Gulf Coast, we're still part of the effect of what's going on. Our continental shelf here is further offshore. We haven't had the effects as quick as others up north along the North Gulf Coast on Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas even, Alabama, and the panhandle of Florida. But tonight, I want to wake everybody up. That's what WVP Radio is all about. We need to wake people up and let them know what's actually going on here. And this doesn't just affect us. This affects everybody, not just North America, not just those on the Gulf Coast. When the things that I'm about to reveal become airborne even more than they have already, everybody around the world can be affected, no different than Chernobyl affected people. When it's in the air, it's a bad thing. So, just to get started, I'd like to bring out what people have said who are working in the Gulf, who have until very recently been fired by BP, of what they say has happened in the Gulf. The things that they've observed and seen for themselves with their own eyes for the past 2 to 2.5 months. What's going on in the Gulf of Mexico is more severe than anybody even wants to admit, except for those who have worked there. Now, a lot of them have been threatened, a lot of people that have tried to speak up. I've spoken with a lot of fishermen. I have people that I know who own a shrimp boat or boats in the Gulf of Mexico. So what I'm about to tell you is not so much third party, it's hearing it from the source. And I know this isn't going to be the kind of things that those who are trying to cover this up want to hear, but it just happens to be that that's the way it is. This is all real. This is going on now. It affects everybody. So, let's go get started. And I do appreciate everybody listening in, whether you're listening in live or you're listening to our archives. This is really a privilege for me to be able to speak openly, to show you all the research that myself and my fantastic producer Liz have come up with. And this is going to be an ongoing matter. This is not just a one-timer. This is going to go on for quite a while. So let's get started. There's been a lot of controversy about these dispersants that BP has been putting in the Gulf of Mexico to disperse the oil. Well, let's just put it this way. BP is not the only one involved. So let's find out who's really involved. Now, there was an article that I pulled off of the internet, which I also found in one non-mainstream media newspaper that I subscribe to from the Midwest. And it talks about the 910th Airlift Wing in Youngstown, Ohio. And their statement said that C-130 Hercules aircraft started aerial spraying operations over the Gulf of Mexico on Saturday, May 1st. And that was right about 9 days after the Deepwater Horizon well had finally caught on fire and sunk. Now, this aerial spraying, and you got to remember, this is according to the 910th Airlift Wing Public Affairs Office. They admitted right then and there that this aerial spraying over the Gulf of Mexico was under the direction of the President of the United States and Secretary of Defense, and that's a quote. Another quote is, the objective of the aerial spray operation is to neutralize the oil spill with oil dispersing agents. Now, there's a gentleman, Joseph Yerkes, who's from Okaloosa Island, Florida. Good Indian name. Along with other Florida commercial fishermen who have seen these military C-130 spraying dispersants on oil that's floating off the coast of Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, and even in Texas. But Joseph was a witness to off the coast of Florida. He lives up in the Panhandle, in case you don't know where Okaloosa Island is. And I'm going to quote him. He said, I witnessed from my home a C-130 military plane flying and obviously spraying over the Gulf of Mexico on July 30th, flying from the north to the south, dropping to low levels of elevation, then obviously spraying or releasing an unknown substance from the rear of the plane. This substance started leaving the plane when it was about a half to 1 mile offshore, with a continuous stream following out of the plane until it was out of sight flying to the south. Now, Joseph said, okay, this substance was not smoke because the residue fell to the water where smoke would have lingered in the air. And he added, this plane was very low near the water and the flight was very similar to viewings I made over the past few weeks. So in other words, this wasn't the first time he'd seen it, when dispersants were sprayed over the Gulf near our area. But the funny part is, the Coast Guard denies it. So he went on to explain his frustrations. Another quote is, they are lying about this whole thing, and it's got me in an uproar. I'm by myself. I'm the only one willing to stand up. Of course, we'll find out in just a few moments he's not. And he goes on to say, I have a lot of friends who want to stand up and speak out. They know the Coast Guard and British Petroleum are lying, but they won't talk because they're getting paychecks and don't want to jeopardize that. They're saying they're finding new oil all the time, but the Coast Guard claims they're testing it and saying the Gulf is safe. I know for a fact they're not testing it, and we watched and heard C-130s fly every night in July. Okay, that's some good revelation, but he's only one man. Let's go on to others. There's a site on the internet called truthout.org, and they had spoken to a lot of boat owners and workers who were working for this program of BP's called Vessels of Opportunity Program, VOO, Vessels of Opportunity. As I spoke to these people, there were quite a few who insisted they remain anonymous. In a little while, we'll find out why they asked that they be anonymous, because of harassment and threats. So truthout.org spoke to one anonymous gentleman who said, quote, just the other day, one of the Carolina skiffs, and I'll stop there. A Carolina skiff is a anywhere from about 20 to a 30 or maybe 35-foot boat that has a pretty good speed. It's made so it can take decent seas. They were made to be used off the coast of the Carolinas in North America, at which the seas can be pretty rough. They're smaller boats, but they have a high bow. They can take rough seas. They can take quite a bit of weight. They can take about 2,000 pounds from everything I've seen. And I grew up on boats on the Atlantic Ocean. So a Carolina skiff is pretty much that. So let me go back to what this gentleman said. Said just the other day, one of the Carolina skiffs passed us spraying something. We went west instead of east as we turned, and a group of Carolina skiffs was spraying something over the water. Then he went on to say there are surfers coming in from the beach with oil on them. There are divers telling us all the oil is on the bottom. Mexico, which is quite different than what all the mainstream media and TV and newspapers around the world have shown. I'm going to bring you tonight some first-hand testimonies from 30 minutes, well, actually an hour and 25 minutes remaining. And this is something I've waited for a lot of years, to be able to have a broadcast like this, and there have been some really great people help me out to get this started. Welcome to the premier broadcast of WVP Radio, and I'm Michael Edward, gladly to be your host. I can't wait to get going with this show. We have an hour, and so I thank them, especially my producer Liz, and lots of others and family behind it. Tonight is not just a premiere broadcast. It's to bring people up to date on what's really going on in the Gulf of Mexico, who live on the Gulf as I do. I'm somebody who lives in Florida along the Gulf Coast, south of Sarasota, and admittedly, although we don't have the same